And you can't say what you say about me because you're not better than me. You're not better than me at basketball. You're not better than me at life.
Hey, man, I never punched down. Draymond's a good player. We're not on the same level.
Take this as my apology. I do apologize if that's viewed as public disrespect, because I like to address public things publicly.
Draymond Green's championship resume has often been used as a counterpoint in debates about his place among NBA greats, especially when compared to Charles Barkley, a Hall of Famer who never won a title. That contrast is frequently treated as the final word in discussions about legacy, but it doesn't always settle the argument. Recently, a televised moment on Inside the NBA added fresh fuel to the conversation when Draymond sat alongside Barkley and made a joking reference to his playing career, landing in a studio atmosphere that felt noticeably tense rather than playful. The lack of reaction from the panel, including Ernie Johnson, only amplified how the exchange was received by viewers. Days later, Draymond addressed the situation again on his podcast, further extending the discussion and keeping the debate around respect, rings, and legacy very much alive.
So if that's the case, take this as my apology. I do apologize if that's viewed as public disrespect, because I like to address public things publicly.
A four-time NBA champion ended up in an unusual spot when he apologized to Hall of Famer Charles Barkley for a joke he still believed was funny. On paper, the rings were supposed to settle the debate, but the moment on Inside the NBA didn't play out that way, especially after the studio reacted with silence instead of laughter. What followed on his podcast only added more attention to the situation, turning a simple exchange into a bigger conversation about respect, tone, and how quickly comments can shift meaning in front of a live audience.
There's this large media storm, whatever you call it, thing going on around my comments to Chuck when I was on Inside the NBA about him being in a Houston Rockets uniform. And I think I want to provide a little bit of clarity and of what I was saying.
He called his mother and told her that Charles Barkley was not better than him at life, only to later admit that Barkley had been right in a way that cut deeper than any argument about rings. The 4 championships he won with the Golden State Warriors in 2015, 2017, 2018, and 2022 suddenly felt smaller against a single blunt line. We're not on the same level. When he opened his episode, there was no warm-up or introduction. He went straight into addressing it head-on, setting a serious tone from the very first moment and showing how one exchange with Charles Barkley had turned into something he couldn't just brush off.
I actually talked to Kenny. Kenny called me and he said, man, I didn't hear you say you when you were talking about the Rockets. He said, so I didn't catch the punchline of the joke. He said, if I caught the punchline of the joke, I thought that was hilarious.
Kenny didn't laugh on the show because he didn't actually hear the comment in real time. Later, he reviewed the tape privately and ended up calling Draymond to laugh about it days after the broadcast. That delayed reaction became part of Draymond's explanation of the moment, as he used the off-air phone call to argue that the situation wasn't as tense as it appeared live on television.
I was like, well, in the moment, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was funny, but nobody reacted.
Nobody reacted. On Inside the NBA, the panel that has laughed together for 25 years didn't even move. That silence became the moment itself, especially coming directly from Draymond Green's own words. Then, instead of letting it sit, he tried to explain why the joke should have landed in the first place, as if the reaction or lack of it needed a second layer of justification.
The reason that I would even say that, right? It'd be very stupid to be like, Chuck, when you were in Phoenix, I wouldn't want to look like that. Or your first couple years in Houston, I wouldn't want to look like that. That'd be stupid, actually. However, what Chuck makes fun about in his career is actually the last 2 years in Houston.
His argument is that the joke was fair because Charles Barkley often makes fun of those same years in his own career, so it should have been acceptable coming from him too. Instead of backing off, he doubles down on that point, sticking to the idea that the comment wasn't out of line and defending why he thought it should have landed.
Chuck's last 2 years in Houston is what he talks about, is what he say. I sucked, man. I was out of shape. I was hurt. I sucked. But I was going to get that free money. That's what he says.
Chuck has the right to make fun of Chuck. That's what 25 years of self-deprecating humor on one of the most popular studio shows in basketball has earned him. But what Draymond Green has to explain is why none of that landed when he tried it. On Inside the NBA, the panel that has laughed together for decades didn't react at all. No smile, no follow-up, no spark. And when that moment didn't land, he shifted away from defending the joke itself and started questioning the audience and how they were receiving it instead.
So what I found interesting was how everybody tried to make it like this whole, oh man, Draymond think he better than Chuck thing. I found that interesting because what it shows is how bad y'all want me to do bad.
Now, the audience becomes the problem, not the joke or the silence that followed it in the room. In a matter of minutes, the explanation shifts again, changing shape as it goes, first defending the joke, then questioning the reaction, and finally redirecting attention toward the people watching it unfold. And then comes the line that defines everything that follows, the sentence the entire podcast seems to orbit around, the one moment that turns a simple exchange into something much bigger.
And Chuck, and you can't say what you say about me because you're not better than me. You're not better than me at basketball. You're not better than me at life. You know.
Listen to the rule he just created. If you are not better than him, you do not get to speak at basketball or even at life. That's the wall he seems to be building around himself in real time, right there on his own podcast chair, as he doubles down instead of stepping back. The message lands less like a joke and more like a boundary being drawn in public. And now he's fully committed to explaining and reinforcing it rather than softening it.
How dare him talk about Chuck? He ain't better. Well, then you can't talk about me because you're not better.
Critics, fans, analysts on the desk, people in the comments, everyone gets grouped into the same category. Nobody who isn't better than him at basketball or life gets a voice in his world. That's the rule he just laid down in front of his own audience, clear and absolute. But that's also the tension sitting underneath it all, because once you set a standard that high, every word you say starts getting measured against it.
Charles Barkley's incredible, had a great career and is one of the media personalities for sure.
One of the media personalities in the room. 60 seconds earlier, Draymond Green had been building a hard line around himself. No one who isn't better than him at basketball or at life gets to speak on him. Now, Charles Barkley is brought back into the frame, praised as someone with an incredible career and a legacy that stands among the great media voices of his era. The compliment softens the edges for a moment, almost like cover, but only to set up one more jab.
I've seen him say things about Steph Curry. His career ain't better than Steph Curry's. I've seen him say things about LeBron James. His career is not better than LeBron James.
Notice who he reaches for in the comparison: Steph Curry and LeBron James. Instead of measuring Charles Barkley directly against himself, he frames it through the lens of all-time great careers, widening the scale of the argument. That shift moves the discussion from personal debate to legacy talk. Then, unexpectedly, his mother enters the story, adding a more personal turn that pulls the moment away from basketball and into something more reflective.
I FaceTime my mom and flip the camera. My mom's favorite three players are Charles Barkley, Shaquille O'Neal, Isaiah Thomas. Favorite three players in her life.
He calls his mother because she was watching the show and texting him, thinking he and Charles Barkley were actually beefing. To clear it up, he puts Barkley on the phone with her, since Chuck is one of her favorite players of all time. In doing so, he turns a tense TV moment into something personal and oddly surreal, having the person he just clashed with reassure his own mother. After that, he shifts again and reaches for the only card he still has left.
4 times I haven't lost, and I know what that feels like, so I'm not upset about that.
4 rings, the number he has leaned on as the final word in almost every legacy debate, comes back as the supposed wall that ends the conversation. It's the argument meant to silence anyone with fewer championships. But then, on the same podcast, he shifts tone and starts listing things he is not. He admits he is not an NBA MVP like Charles Barkley, not an MVP like Karl Malone, naming it out loud in a way that undercuts the earlier certainty. The same voice that challenged Barkley's standing is now placing himself in a different category entirely, measured against players defined by individual awards rather than rings.
Right? Like I'm not an MVP of the NBA. Like Charles, I'm not an MVP of the NBA. Like Karl Malone.
1 MVP, 11 All-Star selections, and a Hall of Fame plaque since 2006. That's Charles Barkley's resume. Draymond Green, by contrast, has 0 MVPs and 4 All-Star appearances, and the list he just read out loud makes that gap impossible to ignore. Every comparison he's making now circles back to what Barkley has that he doesn't, turning not better at basketball into something with real receipts attached. And then, right at that point, he shifts again, this time reading Barkley's own words directly on his podcast, setting up the moment the entire conversation has been building toward.
I'm not a 12-time All-Star like Charles Barkley, an MVP.
6 words, we're not on the same level. That's what Charles Barkley said about Draymond Green on a different show, in front of a different audience, and it lands like a clean, simple verdict. Draymond didn't have to bring it back up at all. He could have ignored it, laughed it off, or leaned on the 4 championships as a response and moved on. Instead, he chooses to engage with it directly, and then begins to answer those words point by point, pulling the moment back into the spotlight rather than letting it fade away.